Welcome to the Posture Performance Podcast, improving the intelligence of the body. Here we will talk from our experiences as fitness trainers, movement specialists, performance therapists, and educators to give you, the listener, an effective approach to get your clients healthier and stronger. We are your hosts, Bryce Turner and Laura Masserdotti, and this podcast is for you. In this episode, we talk about the close relationship with our younger clients and the stresses their growing bodies manage every day. My own daughter joined us on this show to model a simple but effective exercise that can help anyone improve and correct their spine and posture. Listen for additional benefits for improving youth performance.
Hi everyone, we are here today with Bryce to record Training Kits Part 2 because we had to cut our conversation last time, Bryce. And yes, I would like to start this conversation today with this one, saying something that I wanted to cover in the previous episode, of this podcast, but I didn't have the time. Bryce, I just announced that this is officially a podcast.
Oh, yay! Congratulations, us.
Congratulations to me. Congratulations to you.
Can I give the 2 thumbs up?
No.
Yes, there it is.
And we have to say to our audience that we are in a Christmas edition of our conversation of our podcast. So now it's official, Bryce. This is
official.
It's official.
So, Laura and I are going to be speaking about many things.
Yes. Yes, because we are both shy. We don't like to have conversation. We are shy. We don't speak a lot, right?
Yeah, right. That's exactly what it is.
Exactly. So we decided to do this podcast because we both have this necessity to express ourselves, to tell to the world what we do. And now I'm serious. To tell to the world what is happening in our fitness and rehab environment, community, right?
Yeah.
And
right.
What is going to happen. So we call it the LDOA revolution. We will not talk about just about LDOA, of course, but we will talk about LDOA a lot and soma training and etc. And we will explain to who don't know us what LDOA is, what soma training is, what you do in your studio, what I do in my studio, and etc. Yes, we will post
a lot of application. And even though we have a lot of parallels between what both you and I do, we also have our differences, which is, you're in Italy and in a very European environment, and I'm in California, which is a very US driven environment. And you're female, I'm male, you do Pilates, I tend to do some level of manual therapy and performance training. And we're just colliding both of those worlds together and talking about the similarities and the differences and how that's important for really a multitude of listeners and patients and clients and whoever we're working with.
Exactly. We will post one episode every month. We will start like this, then we will see. And we will post this conversation on our social media like Instagram, YouTube, and etc. And then we will see. Okay. So I wanted to talk about back to us. I wanted to talk about transfer. Okay.
Yep.
We will discuss about transfer in another episode of this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
In one of the next episode. This is advertising, Bryce.
Yes.
You should sound like surprised or saying yes. We are.
I've never heard of anything like that.
Exactly, I know. So yes, transfer. When I'm here, I'm here alone. I work alone, or maybe with my assistant. Okay, but especially when I'm with teenager, I'm alone and without their parents. Okay. And they open their heart to me. They tell me their things, what happened at school, their life. Okay, I remember a kid that cry when he arrived here because something happened at school, something like that. They tell me their story, their life, and they often tell me about their parents, their family, what happened in their family, in their their relationship with their parents, and etc. There were one case with a teenager that broke my heart. So we are talking about transfer, okay? This girl, and you probably remember her because at that time I sent you a message with her X-ray because she had a terrible scoliosis. I don't know if you remember.
Yep, I do remember that.
Exactly, and nobody's cared about her. She was basically alone, and in the middle of everything there were COVID. Okay, so she was alone, jumping from my studio to the osteo studio and etc. She had super severe scoliosis. I repeat, I did my best with her, and I did my best to try to connect with her parents, but it was impossible. I repeat, she was basically alone. At some point, she referred to me because I repeat again, I wasn't able to talk with them. Okay, she referred to me that they were talking about surgery, the surgery option.
Right.
Okay, but I knew that with Eldoa and with Soma training exercises, I could have done much more for her. Okay, but I needed a huge commitment from her and a strong support from her family, her parents, but I haven't. So I remember that I told her, listen, if you were my daughter, my nieces, one of my nieces, I will force you to come here 3 times a week or every single day to exercise with me, yes, and you should work, you must work at home alone every single day. Probably you'll hate me, but who cares, and etc. But then I stopped myself, okay, because I understood that my relationship, so this was a sort of counter transfer from me to her, because I was too maternal. I don't know if this word exists in English.
Yeah.
Maternal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
I was talking to her like a mother, and this is not good. Okay, I realized that was another kind of transfer, my transfer, and so I had to stop myself with this kind of behavior, and that's it. At the end of the story, they decided to have her surgery and finish all the story, and that's it. This is a sad story from mine today. I wanted to start with this story that happened to me. That's it.
Yeah.
So it's about the relationship with us, because we are person. I mean.
Well, I think we hit a little bit on this even the first conversation, which was understanding the relationship between when we're working with a youth, whether it's just for fitness or rehab or performance training or whatever it may be. It could be nutrition coaching and things like that. I think I shared a story about nutrition coaching last time, and it's understanding where the drivers are coming from. Is it coming from the parent, and the kid really is in consequence of those decisions that are being run by that family, or in this case, maybe the lack of parental guidance or something like that. And I think that's where even us as trainers, therapists, working with people that are in pain, in dysfunction, and there's that emotional body there's that person there, and a lot of times we need to speak to the psyche of that person to be able to get the results that we want to potentially have, even physically. And when we're compromised in our own practice with our application of our techniques from a rehab setting, a fitness setting, it's very easy to get personally or emotionally involved with that person and what's going on with them, and that can create its own dysfunction in ourselves or in them during that process, and it can take us off course. And it's a delicate line because, you know, on some areas we're trying to constantly read and assess who's in front of us and how do we get the results that we know we need to get to help them with essentially the physical body, but it's directly attached to that emotional body. Because even if you were working with somebody, say it was a teenage girl that wanted to lose weight and she wants to exercise and lose that weight, you know, there's an emotional component to that aside from, you know, somebody like her that might have a structural scoliosis and maybe she's not happy with how her alignment and posture is. And maybe that's all of that is a result of psychological trauma that started, you know, at the family, right? They eat the way they eat, or they hold their posture in a particular way because they have low confidence in themselves. And so they tend to slouch and, you know, be in sort of a very sad or depressed state. And we've seen that a lot of times when we've worked on the psychological side of the individual, that as we open up those barriers or start to break down those barriers, physically that person changes in front of us. But it's delicate for us as practitioners to address some of those hard issues and not get involved in an essentially inappropriate way, especially with somebody that's a youth. But when their parents aren't really involved and you can't really have any dialogue with them, it kind of puts us in a difficult position that we either have to kind of let go and release that person, or we have to be able to get consent from somebody that's in the family or a parent or something like that to be able to help some of those things. Not an easy task, right? Because especially for a youth person that maybe not completely in touch with what their emotional body is, they don't know how to describe what it is those feelings are, those urges are, the things that are going on in their body. The only thing that sometimes that they can manage is sort of how they act, right? So they act out, they get angry, they get violent, they can somebody was just talking about this the other day, that like somebody that's got so much emotional stress, sometimes they go out on the sports field and they're this amazing athlete, but then behind the scenes there's so much trauma that's going on, but they've figured out how to essentially channel their emotions that they tend to have in sports, right? And they get out that emotional stress in sports. And I think that even when we see people who are even over exercisers or, you know, whatever their case is, you know, they get out that stress, that emotional stress by working out and doing fitness, you know, which, you know, we like to think is a positive thing, but it just kind of depends on what the end result is in that process. So
this makes me think to in every sport activity, like in dance, for example, ballet, classic ballet dance, they start to dance when they are 3 or 4 years old, and you must force their body, okay, to reach that kind of performance. And but just 2 or 3 of, or maybe one of them became Roberto Bolle, the most important dancer, principal dancer in the world at the moment.
yeah,
right? But they try to become like Roberto Bolle, and the trainer force their body, force, not respecting their body. This is something that we could discuss about. I mean, doing sport is something in a healthy way, but doing something that prepare your body to become a top level in every sport environment is something different. Remember the beginning of that book of Agassi? He started the book saying, "I hate to play tennis. I hate tennis." And
right.
Yes, they destroy their body, and their career is so short, right?
Mhm.
Because they stop to play tennis or whatever, or dance or whatever, when they are young, basically young, with a destroyed body. And you know this better than me,
Yeah.
because you do rehab. Okay. Yes, we could discuss about the difference between sport, health sport, and sport oriented to the high performance. And these kids, in their destiny, as I said, maybe they will not become like Bolle, or like the most important football player, I don't know the name. Okay, they destroy their body and they skip many years, the most important the most important years of their life. They skip a normal life because they have
Yeah.
to train, and they can hit what they want, right?
Well, dancing is a huge industry for that, right? Because there's so much drilling down, for technique and practice and form and all that. Ice skating is very much the same because you're basically in that dancing world on the ice. But I mean, we again, like, to kind of echo some of the themes that we've talked about earlier, is there's this world of athleticism that the youth is coming up in, and it's driven by not only keeping up with the Joneses. You're familiar with that example, keeping up with the Joneses, but it's the parents really chasing a dream for their child, potentially not in a healthy way, right? All the extra coaching and all the teams that they play on, and
Very often is their dream, right?
right, and then they're just over programming the kid for activities and sports and fitness and to be the top. And a lot of times you see the burnout of the kid, right, at a young age, and they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. And the parent having a psychological breakdown, going, well, wait a second, well, I've spent all this time and all this money and all this effort to try to get them to like this and do this, but it's too much too fast. And you see a lot of burnout for kids, and by the time they get into high school, they're not playing the sports that maybe they even were good at. And we've even seen that with some of the golfers, where a lot of the young golfers give up because golf is a very difficult game, and the hours that you need to focus on becoming, the top of your sport is very difficult. And, so you even look at the industry of sports psychology is so huge these days, even professional sports. Like, there isn't one team out there without some team of sports psychologists that are dealing with the players and managing their mental emotional capacity. And you just saw something like that in the NBA recently, with a basketball player that has a lot of emotional, I think, trauma from his youth, and he lashed out, or has lashed out quite a few times over his career, and that's very problematic. And so they're trying to manage who that emotional person is, while at the same time matching some level of competition and performance in what it is they do to be part of a team. But all of that starts from a very young age. And, hopefully along the path, kids, aside from their parents, have people that they can lean on, and somebody like you. But like you said, we have to be careful ourselves about how emotionally involved we get, because at the end of the day, we have a business and they're a client, right? They're not our kid, right? They're somebody that's paying us to execute a certain task or a service to them. And even though we can get emotionally involved and care, because we're all caring people, which is why we do what we do, we have to watch what lines we cross with, especially youth athletes, and or anybody that needs rehab or corrective exercise and things like that, and make sure that we have that team around us that we might be able to refer somebody out. Like, hey, this really isn't something that I deal with, but here's somebody that I want you to go see, or I want you to talk to, or I want you to work with, that can kind of pick up the reins from where we potentially leave off.
We
So.
go back. We will go back on regarding us as trainers and us as a person, and how to protect us from this emotional.
Yeah.
We go better about this. This is interesting in my opinion. And
Yeah.
back to, I just want to finish it because we mentioned the ballerina, the dancer. I sometimes
Hmm.
train some young dancer, because of course Pilates and dance are linked together.
Right.
And it's funny because they are dancer. So as I said, they force their body, and and when they are here, you have to know that we have a series of in Romanas Pilates, we have a series of safety rules. Let's call it safety rules, and also yes, things that we don't want to teach uh, to young people because they are
Hmm.
growing. Their vertebrae are not totally developed, and etc. Okay, so we don't want to hurt them. And it's funny because they go to the ballet class and they kill their body, and they come here and I don't want their roll, I don't want they do just a little arch of the spine, and when they go in the ballet class they hold themselves like this, and
Hmm.
so we protect them, they grow in body, and then they go out from here and they kill their body. But this again is the difference between someone who is going to do something for performance at high level and something that is going this just for sport, for staying better and etc. Right?
Hmm. Right.
Do you want to add something regarding your stuff, Bryce? Do you want to add something?
Oh, I mean, yeah, so, in my world, we're still continuing to build this youth performance program. It's been quite an adventure. I mean, it's something that I think is growing really big right now in the States, and it's been growing for a while, but I think it's starting to really elevate in every community that's around us because, you know, the way I kind of like take a step back and look at the full vision of this youth performance movement is, you know, my my parents are baby boomers from World War, right? I'm their offspring, and now I have my kids, right? So there's these surges of populations that happen throughout the decades, and we're in the middle of sort of this, you know, third level of the baby boom generation, where all of a sudden there's tons of kids, and with all these kids that are around, there's tons of activities, right? The sport teams, the rec teams, the private teams, the travel teams, the club teams, and again, like to stay relevant with all of this competition, because there's so many programs that are going on right now, is really making sure that there's a management of health and development during sport play. And if you want your kid to be active and be strong and be agile and have good balance, and you want to have them be a high level performer in the sport world, it's almost like they need to have some sort of trainer or coach or movement program that they follow, aside from just being a kid, right? When it all comes down to it, all this stuff that we sign our kids up for and organize them in their sports and activities, um, they still need to figure out time to be a kid, because they go to school all day, and that's sort of, they get very little recreational time. And then after school, they go to their sport, but their sport tends to be very focused on what that sport needs for movement. And that isn't the full spectrum of like real play time, right? Where I'm going to go climb a tree, I'm going to go run through the field, I'm going to go play on the beach, I'm going to go be with my friends and wrestle around and, you know, play some sort of like sport or agile game or anything like that. So, a lot of times the landscape seems to be very scheduled, and says, at 4 o'clock you've got this practice, and at 5 o'clock you've got this instruction, and at 7 o'clock you've got this, and then they've got homework and eat food and then go to bed, right? And so, recognizing that there's so much information out there in regards to what it is that we do with exercise and therapy and recovery and nutrition, and trying to bring that into a landscape for the children to take advantage of. And for us in our own world, it's hard to work with really kids that are younger than 8 years old, right? Because younger than 8 years old, there's a maturity level that's difficult to kind of wrap your head around, especially when you've got a group of kids in front of you. And I have my standards because I'm a father, and I definitely don't like hanging out with kids that I can't manage. Or, just like you said, sometimes I want to step in and be the father for that kid, and I'm like, wait a second, that's not my kid, right? And so I just either have to ignore them and push them away and say, okay, you're not able to be in my program because it's taking away from the experience of the other kids. So I have to manage sort of those expectations, or find a psychological way to organize that kid so that I can get the most out of them and they can pay attention and do whatever it is they need to do. But to properly get kids to have awareness in their body, what exercise and what movements are you presenting to them to help them continue to grow and develop in their own movement patterns so that they're a healthy individual. And a lot of what we talk about on our end is that awareness of their alignment and their posture as they move, right? Do you know that you're rounding your spine? Do you know that you're slouching? Do you know that you're in a forward head posture? Do you know that, when you squat, your heels come up, or, whatever the movement pattern may be? And really trying to organize very specific movements, and then being able to carry that over to isolated exercises, like teaching a kid how to squat properly, right? Which I think is one of the more valuable things, because it adds that spinal awareness and posture, and you have a lot of joints moving at one time. You don't need to load a kid, right? There's a lot of research back and forth of like what age is appropriate to load a kid so that you're safe. But most importantly, taking that information from some sort of squat and then doing a lot of agility and movement things that they do have to be very sort of proprioceptively sound or awareness based in their movements, so that they can challenge their body in a lot of different ways, not only from a coordination standpoint, but a strength standpoint, speed and quickness, and then have that translate into not only a healthy life every day when they go to school and they have a 30-pound backpack on their shoulders because they have all their books, but really just being able to hold themselves up and being able to program their mind and their body so that they're healthy into their adult years, and they don't have those compromised spines or joints and things like that because of bad posture and alignment, or poor movement patterns. So, for me in my head, it's a big task, right? It's to teach and teach and teach and repetition and teach and repetition, but in a way that also doesn't overstress that kid in their environment. So they're not working out super intense, and then they're going to sports and they're super intense, and they don't get that recovery time. So also teaching the balance of making sure that they do go home and they eat proper, and they do go to bed at the right time, and they do have a recovery program, because there's really no kids out there that really do what I would call as a recovery. They might rest and they might lounge around and things like that, but they're not necessarily doing things like Eldoa or doing stretching or doing things that are like that I think that are really the big bang in the longevity of anybody playing a sport or working out or keeping their bodies healthy through their adult years. So it's really creating that foundational principle that says, hey, without this building block in your training program or in your life movement program, which is all the recovery exercise or the mobility exercise or rest and meditation and breathing and proper diet, if you don't have that built in as a foundational principle, all kinds of things are going to go wrong at some point. It's just about whether or not you cross that threshold in your physical body, and your body at some point says, I can't do this anymore, and you get an injury or whatever may happen. So that's a really big fundamental that we're building right now in the sort of entirety of the movement program or the youth training program.
I would finish saying that you said the word, and we didn't prepare this, but the word at the end of the story is always awareness, right?
Yeah.
Everything comes around this word. And yes, I of course I want to mention the Eldoa and how it works for kids, and because we always talk thinking that people that is listening or watching us knows what we are talking about, but maybe they don't know. And that's the reason why we are doing this, and that's the reason of the Dear Dog Revolution. We want to spread this because we see every single day here in our studio that it works, and it works a lot with kids, and about with kids with imbalances, every kind of imbalances, and it's great methodology for scoliosis, especially for scoliosis. So I get back to the beginning of this conversation between us today. Yes, it's a great methodology and it works. I post something regarding the famous child Eldoa that is so simple, but it works and create awareness in their spine and etc.
Yeah.
And parents can teach it and assist kids when they do it. I repeat, it's easy. You don't need to be a trainer to teach the kids Eldoa, right?
Right.
Okay, Bryce, I think we said all we wanted to say today. Do you want to add something or?
Well, for maybe some of you that are out there, I actually have my daughter here. Maybe we do the Kid Eldoa.
Yes.
We'll show you guys what the Kid Eldoa is.
We didn't prepare this, but it's nice. I like this.
We didn't. I'm gonna have to move my camera, but we'll do
that's it. Because we are two natural entertainers. That's the reason.
That's right. So this is my daughter Jade.
Yes.
And she is part of our youth performance program. She's 11 years old. For the most part, she's never really had any scoliotic issues or anything like that, but she's an athlete too. She plays several different sports. And then she's been doing our workouts here at our facility too. So ever since she's been young, she's always moved really well. She's always played. She's always done all these things. She did gymnastics, she danced and all that stuff. So my older son, because he did have a little scoliosis, we did utilize a lot of the Kid Eldoa, and then eventually we, even at a young age for him, he learned how to do L5S1 and T18-9, and we've posted that several times as far as like him doing those exercises. And for him, because he's been so involved in his own sort of recovery and wellness program to keep his body healthy with all the sports that he plays, he a lot of times will come to the education courses and help teach some of those exercises, especially for the Kid Eldoas. But Jade, does them from time to time too, just because it's sort of, the family nature of it all. So we'll just go through this real quick.
Perfect.
For those of you that are at home. And, this is a great exercise, not only just for kids, but a great way to teach your body how to elongate your spine. So go ahead and have a seat here. And we're going to back up just a little bit. Okay. And so what our goal is really, we call it axial extension. So axial extension is just spinal lengthening, where we're trying to really lift up the spine away from the pelvis. So you can see in this posture, her feet are about, we'll say, hip width apart and flat to the floor. She's going to take her hands just behind her body so that they're flat on the floor. The fingers are going to point backwards. The hands are spread out. And she's a little bit at an angle, which is totally fine. Our goal is to try to straighten that spine up as much as we can. She's going to keep that chin in, like we want the cheekbones over the collarbones. And I want her from this position, she's going to keep those sit bones or her pelvis on the ground. And then she's just going to work with her breath. And as she inhales, I want her to try to sit up as tall as she can, like she's trying to lengthen through the crown of her head. And as she lengthens up and tries to lift that spine away from her pelvis, she can focus on her breath out and really try to work with an effort to elongate. So inhale, lengthen. Exhale, try to manage that lengthening as tall as you can away from the pelvis. And with any psyche of a kid, because she's 11, she understands what I'm saying to her. She understands that there's an effort and an organization that she needs to have for this exercise. For a kid that's younger, try to make it a game. Like I would always make my son like, okay, try to get as tall as you can. Oh, you won't sit up tall. You won't do that. Come on, let's do it. Let's go, go, go. And for the kid, it doesn't have to be totally perfect, but it needs to try to work on something that's elongating through that spine to help open up the spine. And if anything, try to straighten it out if there's a slight curve in there to balance out the musculature and the joints and the soft tissue and the fascia, most importantly, right? So we're going to do that for about 60 seconds, and then she can relax. And that's going to be our kid
Can
Eldor.
you just move Jade in sideways so that they can
Yeah,
see
so
that?
turn sideways.
Perfect, just for a moment.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So then there's the feet. Her spine is nice and straight.
Perfect.
Okay, the hands are just to the ground like they're a kickstand. And then she's trying to breathe and elongate like she's lifting up away from the pelvis. And my goal again is just to try to get that spine as straight as it can be, and then try to get that effort going through the ceiling like she's sitting up as tall as she can.
Perfect. Thank you, Jade.
Thank you.
And you have to know that I was here and I was lengthening my spine too.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's normal. It's normal.
It's hard not to. It's like let's sit up straight.
We have a problem, guys. We have a problem. Okay, thank you for this conversation. So see you in the next episode of this podcast. I'm happy to do this podcast with you. Okay,
yeah,
stay there. Stay there. Ciao.
Yeah, ciao.